On April 2nd, 1964, a helicopter dropped a survey team onto Bouvet Island. It was the most isolated piece of land on Earth. No trees, no shelter. Ice cliffs straight into black water. The wind almost never stopped. They touched down on a strip of new rock called Niroisa. It barely existed on the maps, and within minutes, they saw it. A lifeboat. But why would a lifeboat be found on the most remote island in the world? The boat was 20 feet long, half swamped, floating in a lagoon inland from the surf, guarded by seals. No name painted on the side, no markings at all. On the rocks nearby, there was a metal drum, a pair of oars, and a copper buoyancy tank that had been ripped open and hammered flat, as if someone needed a sheet of metal and had no other choice. The team looked around for the next part of the story. A camp, a fire pit, tracks, bones, anything. They found nothing. Just a boat that had made it to the end of the world. And the people who brought it there were gone. Niroisa, the new strip of land which the boat was discovered on, wasn't actually formed until the late 1950s by the settling of rock. Given that Admiral Alan Crawford and his team of surveyors didn't actually discover the boat until April of 1964, we know that the boat must have arrived on the island sometime between 1955 and April of 1964. As far as Admiral Crawford knew, the island hadn't been visited by any ships since the South African SAS Transvaal visited in 1955. But clearly, someone had. What extraordinary series of events could have led someone to the island on a lifeboat? How could anyone have reached the most remote island in the world like that? And why does the trail end the second they get there? The simplest explanation is that it was a lifeboat from a wreck. A ship goes down somewhere in the South Atlantic. A small group gets into a boat. They drift or navigate and somehow make landfall on Bouvet. It would account for a few details. The boat is in the lagoon instead of pulled high onto the rocks. Nearby there's a small pile of equipment, but the theory runs into the same wall every time. What happened after they arrived? There was no camp, no shelter, no fire site, no bodies. Niroisa is the only broad, flat, mostly snow-free place on the island. If people landed here and died here, there should have been signs. Even a quick search should have turned up something. Leaving Niroisa also doesn't make sense. The cliffs are dangerous, the interior is ice, and avalanches are common. And the seals and sea elephants, the closest thing to food, are right there on the beach. There's no reason to move inland. Then there's the problem of reaching Bouvet at all. It's hard to find, even with modern navigation, and it sits far from normal routes. This theory seems unlikely. Some have speculated that the boat may have floated to the island without anyone on board. While that would explain why no people or bones were found, it doesn't explain the equipment that's clearly tied to those who arrived on the boat. This isn't it. Upon some slightly deeper thinking, a third theory emerges. Instead of drifting in from a wreck, the lifeboat may have been a tender from a larger, unidentified vessel. Then, for whatever reason, it had to be abandoned, and those who arrived at Bouvet on the boat left via some other means of transportation. This theory aligns with the facts of the case, such as the lack of bones but inclusion of the equipment. But what boat, if this theory is true, could have taken the people to the island? Is there any hard evidence of this? Well, actually, yes. But it comes from a somewhat unexpected place. In 2011, a London historian named Mike Dash published a deep dive into the mystery on his history blog, A Blast from the Past. He traced every known visit to the island, cross-referenced shipping records, and combed through obscure Antarctic survey reports. He even found a tantalizing lead, a Soviet researcher named Solyanik, who had published bird observations from Bouvet Island, suggesting the Soviets had been there around 1958, connected to a whaling fleet called the Slava. But Dash couldn't confirm what actually happened on the ground. Then, in 2016, a Reddit user going by Qualis Libet posted on r/unresolved mysteries. They had dug up a passage from page 129 of the Transactions of the Oceanographical Institute, published in Moscow in 1960, a Soviet academic journal, never translated into English, barely accessible outside of Russia. And buried in it was a straightforward account of exactly what happened. In 1958, a scientific reconnaissance vessel called the Slava 9 departed as part of the Slava Antarctic whaling fleet. On November 27th, it arrived at Bouvet Island. A group of 10 scientists and crew members went ashore in a small boat to conduct observations on the newly formed Nuroisa. But the weather turned, and they couldn't get back to the ship for 3 days. On November the 29th, a helicopter from the fleet was able to reach them. All 10 were evacuated by air, leaving the boat behind. And for over 50 years, no one in the West knew, because the Soviets simply never mentioned it. It was a footnote in an obscure journal, written in Russian, about a routine stop on a whaling expedition. The Cold War made sure the two halves of the story never met, until a Reddit user with the right language skills and the patience to dig through Soviet oceanographic records finally connected them. The boat at the end of the world was just a boat that no one came back for.